What if the most respected judge in town was accused of bribery? Would you believe it? Judge Edward Finch had spent decades building a reputation as a pillar of justice, fair, unwavering, and incorruptible. His rulings were respected, his integrity unquestioned. But that all changed with one shocking accusation: bribery and evidence tampering. The news spread like wildfire, shaking the town to its core. Some refused to believe it, convinced that the charges were a smear campaign. Others whispered in hushed tones, questioning whether power had finally corrupted even the most righteous. As the scandal grew, so did the tension. Was Judge Finch a victim of deception, or had he truly fallen from grace? Sarah Finch had spent years building her own career as a young attorney, determined to prove herself beyond just being Judge Edward Finch's daughter. But when the accusations against her father surfaced, everything she had worked for came under scrutiny. Colleagues now looked at her with suspicion, and whispers followed her in the courtroom. Was she complicit? Did she know more than she was letting on? The scandal threatened not just her father's legacy, but her own future in law. Despite the storm of controversy, Judge Finch remained calm, almost unnervingly so. While the town erupted in heated debates, some defending him, others calling for his resignation, he carried on as if justice would inevitably prevail. But Sarah wasn't so sure. The accusations were damning. Bribery linked to Samuel Smith's company, a major corporation with a history of environmental violations. The supposed evidence? Leaked documents pointing to secret payments, money trails leading to offshore accounts, and critical case files that had mysteriously vanished. Sarah knew her father, but she also knew the power of evidence. If this was a setup, someone had gone to great lengths to destroy him. If it wasn't, if there was even a sliver of truth, what did that mean for everything she believed in? Sarah Finch refused to stand by and watch her father's reputation crumble. If there was any chance he was innocent, she would find the truth. But every step she took felt like wading into deeper waters, where allies turned into skeptics, and even friends hesitated to stand by her. The town was splitting in two: those who still believed in Judge Finch's integrity, and those convinced he had finally been exposed. Protests erupted outside the courthouse, demanding justice. But justice for whom? The accused or the accusers? Late one evening, Deputy Whitman pulled her aside with a hushed warning. "Keep an eye on those documents." It was cryptic, but Sarah understood. The missing case files had been a major part of the accusations, and if someone had gone through the trouble of making them disappear, perhaps the real truth was buried within them. Determined, she combed through the courthouse archives, poring over old records, until she made a chilling discovery. Several pages had been carefully removed from key case files. Someone had tampered with the evidence, but was it to frame her father or to cover up something even bigger? With the trial looming, the pressure mounted. Every day, she faced the silent stares of colleagues who once respected her, but now questioned her motives. Was she fighting for justice, or was she simply a daughter unable to accept the truth? Sarah didn't know who she could trust anymore, but she knew one thing: she wouldn't stop until she uncovered the truth, no matter where it led. The prosecution came prepared. They laid out their case with precision. Bank statements linking Judge Finch to suspicious transactions, emails hinting at under-the-table deals, and witness testimonies that painted a damning picture. Sarah sat at the defense table, her jaw tight as she listened. It was a well-constructed case, but something felt off. Too perfect. Too clean. And then there was Samuel Smith, sitting in the gallery, his presence alone casting a shadow over the proceedings. He was a man used to control, and Sarah could feel his eyes on her, as if daring her to challenge what had already been set in motion. But she wasn't backing down. As the prosecution's witnesses took the stand, she methodically poked holes in their statements, exposing contradictions, subtle shifts in their wording, details that didn't quite align. Then came Paul Robinson, a junior accountant from Smith's company, whose testimony was meant to cement her father's guilt. But as she pressed him, she noticed his hands trembling, his gaze darting toward Smith. Something wasn't right. She leaned forward, her voice steady but sharp. "You were told to create false records, weren't you?" Silence filled the courtroom. Robinson's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Sarah saw the panic flicker in his eyes, the weight of truth pressing against him. And then, he broke. "Yes," he stammered. I was given instructions to alter the financial records. The money transfers weren't real." The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, the judge calling for order. Sarah barely heard any of it. She had cracked the case wide open. Now the real fight for justice had begun. The courtroom was in chaos. As Paul Robinson's confession sent shockwaves through the crowd, Sarah caught a glimpse of movement near the back. A man in a dark suit leaned in close to Samuel Smith, whispering something urgent. Within seconds, Smith stood, his face pale, his jaw clenched. Then, without a word, he slipped out of the courtroom, pushing past stunned onlookers. By the time anyone thought to stop him, he was gone. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed he had fled town. Others whispered that he was in hiding, afraid of what would come next. But Sarah wasn't convinced this was just about Smith. Something bigger was at play. Digging deeper into Smith's past dealings, she found a name that kept resurfacing: Mayor Henry Baxter. A seasoned politician with a reputation for backdoor deals and buried scandals, Baxter had long held a grudge against Judge Finch. Years ago, Finch had ruled against him in a major corruption case, costing him millions in potential profit. Now, the pieces were falling into place. Baxter had the motive, the power, and the connections to orchestrate this entire scheme. Then came the revelation that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Detective Ellen Raymond, a veteran investigator who had been quietly watching the case unfold, pulled her aside. "Smith isn't running," she said, her voice low but firm. "He's being silenced." Sarah's breath caught. If Smith was no longer in control, then the real mastermind wasn't just trying to escape justice. They were making sure no one lived to tell the full story. Sarah and Detective Raymond had one last lead: David Barnes, a former accountant for Smith Enterprises, who had vanished from the public eye years ago. Finding him wasn't easy, but when they finally tracked him down in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, they saw the fear in his eyes before he even spoke. "I don't want any trouble," Barnes muttered, glancing at the door as if expecting someone to burst in. But as Sarah pressed him, laying out everything they had uncovered, the weight of his silence became unbearable. Finally, with a deep, shuddering breath, he spoke. "It was Baxter," he admitted. "This started over a decade ago. Smith was just a pawn. Baxter needed Judge Finch gone, and he orchestrated everything. The bribes, the missing files, even the witnesses. It was all a setup." With Barnes's confession in hand, Sarah wasted no time. She filed an emergency motion to reopen the case, citing new evidence of a deeper conspiracy. The courthouse buzzed with tension as the hearing was set. As she entered the courtroom, her gaze locked onto Baxter, seated near the back. His expression was unreadable, but she knew he wasn't used to being challenged like this. The judge listened carefully as Sarah laid out the new revelations, while Baxter's lawyers scrambled to dismiss the claims. A long silence followed as the judge deliberated, the entire room hanging on his next words. Then at last he spoke. "In light of this new evidence, the court orders a full investigation into Mayor Henry Baxter's involvement in this case." A ripple of shock spread through the courtroom. Sarah exhaled. Knowing this fight wasn't over, but justice had finally turned its gaze to the true mastermind. The morning of Baxter's arrest, the town held its breath. The once untouchable mayor was led out of his office in handcuffs, his usual air of authority replaced with silent fury. News spread fast. His decade-long scheme had finally unraveled. And with that, Samuel Smith, seeing no more reason to protect a fallen ally, finally agreed to testify. Under oath, he confirmed everything: the bribes, the fake evidence, the threats. Baxter had orchestrated it all, using Smith as a shield while pulling the strings from the shadows. With the truth laid bare, the court had no choice but to clear Judge Finch of all charges. The moment the ruling was announced, the tension that had gripped the town for months seemed to lift. Some who had doubted him now stood in silent regret, while others openly celebrated his name being restored. But for Sarah, the victory was more than just her father's redemption. It was a transformation. She had stepped into the fire of corruption and emerged stronger, not just as an attorney, but as a force for justice. As she walked out of the courthouse, she thought of everything it had taken to get here: the sleepless nights, the betrayals, the relentless fight for truth. And yet, it had been worth it. Because justice isn't just about winning cases, it's about standing up, no matter the odds, no matter the cost. In the end, corruption thrives when good people stay silent. And Sarah Finch had proven that the truth, no matter how buried, will always find its way to the light. From a shocking accusation against Judge Edward Finch to the unraveling of a decade-long conspiracy, this story was a battle for truth against corruption. Sarah Finch, a determined young attorney, fought against powerful forces, exposing hidden schemes and ultimately restoring her father's reputation. With the arrest of Mayor Baxter and Samuel Smith's testimony, justice prevailed, but not without sacrifice. What would you have done in Sarah's place? Would you have fought against the odds or stepped back in the face of danger? Comment below with your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating tales of justice and perseverance. Stay tuned for our next gripping tale of truth and justice. Coming soon.